All right. Well, hello and welcome everyone to another Slated weekly film finance Q&A. My name is Mitchell. I'm Slated's manager of EP services, and we are here every week on Tuesdays at 1 o'clock p.m. Pacific time. Our conversations in this room are really about everything related to getting movies made. So that ranges from development and packaging on the one end to sales and distribution on the other, and of course, how to assemble financing for your project. Now, our goal in these sessions is to be as helpful as possible to any filmmaker who has a question. So, whether you're brand new to the film industry or you have a bunch of credits under your belt, there are no dumb questions in this room. We frequently answer questions from beginning screenwriters and seasoned investors alike. We're also, of course, happy to answer any Slate-related questions that you may have, including how our executive producer team chooses which films to package and finance, as well as the best ways to take advantage of the tools on our platform. Now, we usually go for a bit over an hour, but that all depends on how many questions we get as we go along. First half of the room, usually we'll talk about a couple of news topics or some other things happening in the industry that catches our eye. However, we invite you to already start asking your questions then. So how you can do that is if you have a question for our team, go ahead and please click on that react button in the bottom of the screen to raise your hand and raise it early so that we can be sure to get to it before the session ends today. If you don't want to talk on mic today, that's also no problem. In that case, we welcome you to write your questions in the comments section. And I can see that a couple of you are already doing it, which is amazing. And we will go ahead and read your question out loud and answer it live. Also, if you like these conversations, please feel free to share the Zoom link with your friends and other filmmakers. You can also check out some recordings of our prior meetings, as well as conversations with filmmakers and more at our YouTube channel, which you can visit just at Slated. All right, well, I think with all that housekeeping out of the way, let's go ahead and introduce our panel. So joining me today, as they do every week, are Greg and Chelsea. Thank you for joining us today. How are you both doing?
I'm doing good, Mitchell. Thank you for asking. Good to be here with you. A busy week, lots going on, lots to talk about, and I see lots of questions from the community already. So happy to be here. How are you, Chelsea?
Busy. I feel like I say the same thing every time. Doing good, still busy. First full week back after the holiday week. So, yeah.
Are you getting any Toronto International Film Festival email bounce backs? Are people going this year? I feel like they weren't going for several years. Are things back to normal in that sense?
I think so. I feel like we were toying with the idea of going. We didn't end up attending this year. And I've had a lot of people ask if we are there, just requesting meetups and whatnot. So I do think that people are in attendance for sure. And I am excited to hear about the climate there once everyone's back.
Awesome. So our first topic of conversation today deals with the weekend box office. There are a couple of highlights from it. Notably, the big headlines that you might have been seeing is that Conjuring Last Rites, which is ostensibly the last Conjuring movie, um, has just won the box office. It had its biggest opening ever for the franchise with $194 million globally. Domestically, it also had a huge opening. It's one of the top three horror movies domestically, right behind It and It Chapter 2. Internationally, I believe it's number one in all horror movies, which is a major, major feat, especially when you consider that The Conjuring itself is not a super expensive franchise. According to reports, it has just a $55 million price tag. And I say just a relatively, but for a studio film, that is fairly conservative, especially one that has had as many entries in as The Conjuring has. So I'm sure that Warner Brothers themselves are very happy with that. Speaking of which, the other highlight from the weekend is that Warner Brothers itself has made box office history. It is the first film studio to have ever made seven consecutive films that have opened to above $40 million each. And that is a huge turnaround from earlier this year and last, where the people over at the top of the studio were rumored to be on the way out because they had just had a number of high profile bombs like Joker 2, Mickey 17, Alto Nights, and several other films. They've really turned it around in this second half of the year with Minecraft movie, Sinners, F1, Superman, and now Conjuring, among a couple of others as well. So a lot of very interesting things, a lot of very positive things for the box office, and especially for Warner Brothers. Uh, Greg, Chelsea, Chris, do you guys have any takeaways or insights into kind of what this might be signaling for the box office? Are we, does this seem like a one-off sort of thing? Is this, maybe signs that, there's an audience demand for movies in theaters? And, just in the past couple weeks in August, we haven't had a whole lot of films that have been able to satisfy that thirst. Yeah, any kind of takeaways that you guys had from this news?
Well, at a macro level, I think it all makes sense. I mean, studio movies take so long to acquire and develop and package and finance and release and do the marketing schedule and spend and book the theaters. I mean, it's a very slow moving behemoth, the releasing infrastructure at a studio. And so I think, anytime analysts are looking at a string of a few movies that don't do well and declaring that everything is terrible, we always pump the brakes a bit in this room because the trends are so much larger than, one summer or 1 month or even in many studio histories, they're bigger than 1 year. And so I'm sure that the executive team and the distribution team over at Warner's is saying to themselves, yeah, I mean, these are the fruits born of all the hard work that we started 3, 4 years ago, and they're probably not surprised at all. So I think that's a good thing, good for them. One of the reasons why folks are so sensitive to a weekend not being excellent or a summer not being excellent is that studios can't really, in the theatrical game right now, they can't really afford to lose too much ground. Whereas before they were making money hand over fist. Now movies can really make, close to $0. I mean, in relative terms for these large studio films, if they don't do well, you're losing hundreds of millions of dollars or at least tens of millions of dollars. So a loss really stings in the way that it didn't used to 15 years ago. But again, just from the macro perspective, the year to date box office domestically isn't that far off. Through this last weekend, closing on September 7th, we logged $6,138,000,000 and total domestic box office. And this time last year, up till the same date, the 7th of September, it was 5.9 billion. So a couple hundred million off. It's, not a tiny difference, but it's also really, relatively speaking, weekend to weekend, it's something that could be made up in some of the releases that have yet to hit theaters. So I think it's a healthy sign. If anything, my takeaway so far is that theatrical certainly isn't dead, but it's more hot and cold. When you miss, you really miss. When you win, you that can sort of be more muted as well. But viewers, and I think you can just all ask yourselves what your viewing habits have been, how often you stay home and wait for a movie to hit streaming, and what the collapse of that theatrical exclusive window has done to your own purchase habits, how often you choose to spend the $15 or $20 to go out. And I think the answer is it's really got to be good. You got to hear that it's good. It's got to really sort of connect with that audience. And horror fans consistently have shown that when a movie delivers on their expectations, they will come out and support it. And that to me continues to be, I mean, the data shows that, the historical data shows that. Slated's financial analysis model is trained on a data set that shows that horror films, when they're good, really outperform. And this year, that trend is still rock solid. So that's exciting. I don't, beyond that, it's probably psychological why there's some periods in contemporary American history why folks like more horror than others. But I'm glad to see any genre connecting the way that this has. Mitchell, Chelsea, are you guys Conjuring fans? I know, Mitchell, you're sort of our resident, more of a horror buff than the rest of us, perhaps. But
Yeah, I have seen I think all the Conjuring entries except for this latest one, which I'm hoping to go see this weekend. Um, but yeah, it is a cool franchise. Not all of them are winners. But for I think one of the interesting things about The Conjuring in particular is that it's not a franchise that is solely based on like the haunting of the week. Definitely, each of these movies have a little bit of a different thing. They've got different gimmicks and monsters that are cool and innovative, and many have been spun off into the Nun and Annabelle and all that stuff. But for myself, one of the big things behind The Conjuring, why it sticks out to me as a memorable part of horror, is the relationship between the two main characters, Ed and Lorraine, played by Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson. Um, it's a they're both like very, very well drawn characters. You care about both of them. You care about their relationship, um, to the point where I think honestly, like they may be one of my favorite kind of romances, even though they start out as a married couple. They may be one of my favorite kind of romances in kind of genre films as a whole. And for me, whenever I see kind of a movie with them on screen, whether it's one of the Conjuring movies or one of the spin-offs, I do love to see that. And from going online, seeing kind of what people are saying about this movie and the other ones in the past, I think that's one of the attractive things that keeps people coming back to this franchise in particular. It's that, it's not just about this being from the visionary James Wan and, his studio and all of that, but it's that these are characters that people have got invested in them. Um, and that's rarer for a horror film and certainly rare for a horror franchise, which is oftentimes going to be prioritizing the hook, the kind of plot mechanics, and oftentimes has a higher mortality rate than a lot of other genres. Um, so you don't quite get that investment. So Conjuring is a really special franchise, and I do think there's maybe some lessons there that aspiring horror filmmakers can definitely take away, and just trying to make your characters, um, have that same level of emotional connection that these guys do, trying to make them deeply empathetic, caring. And I know there's a bunch of other stuff. These were based on real people who may not have been like that whatsoever. But in the context of the movie, these two characters really work. And I think they're, seeing this success, I would chalk up a large part to just the investment the audience has in that particular relationship.
You make a really good point, Mitchell, about the character development. It's something that we hear a lot or have heard over the years from producers who maybe their script needs a bit of work, and the explanation that comes back is, well, it's a horror film, and so my characters don't need to be developed, or they don't need to have arcs. And certainly you can point to so many movies out there that did just fine in recent, not even recent, but I would say more distant theatrical history. But it sure helps when the characters are developed, and in particular, you mentioned that relationship. That's sort of an extra dimension to character development, because then the audience can sink their teeth not just into those individual character arcs, but into the arc of their relationship together. All that is a lot more hard work, but when that underpins a good horror hook or premise, it can really go the distance, as this film has, and it's just shy of fresh, 59%. I'm curious to dive into the reviews and see if those are logical issues or something, or production issues. I don't know. But the audience appears to like it more, with a audience score in the high 70s. I think 79. So, what about you, Chelsea? Do you self-describe as a horror fan? I feel like no, but you see any good movie. Is that fair? And do you have any exposure to this franchise?
Yeah, I would say I'm a horror fan, mostly because I enjoy it. I am not as a uh rabid consumer, I would say, as Mitchell. I don't see quite everything. But I do enjoy horror a lot. And I don't have much experience with the Conjuring franchise. I know that it is huge. I did really enjoy the first one, but I think that's the only one that I've seen. And I have to say, I was surprised to see the records that this last one broke. I guess, firstly, because I didn't know that it was the last one. I like how Mitchell said that it's ostensibly the last one, because maybe they make more after they've realized how much money they're potentially leaving on the table here. But I did get to thinking just about all of the horror kind of hits that we've had this year. We've had such a good year. Maybe that's true every year, but I'm just thinking back and like, we've had such a variety of original films, sequels, and also revivals. So we've had Sinners, we had that huge Final Destination movie, which everyone said was actually good, which I have not seen yet. Weapons, of course, 28 years later, if we want to call that one a horror. And yeah, it's kind of nice to see such a variety, first of all. And then I was also thinking about a conversation that Mitchell and I were having last week about whether or not these films would finally be in contention for awards because I think, they're sort of genre films have slowly been trickling into the award conversation, which has been nice, mostly in technical categories. And that's always nice. Like we want to see kind of that genre be taken seriously, not just by audiences, but by awards bodies. And I think films like Sinners, like Nosferatu last year, um, and even like The Substance, that wasn't, I don't know if we could call that straight up horror, but horror adjacent for sure, was in, quite serious conversations and nominated for at the Oscars. So there are, of course, always going to be the films that are not really made for awards. That's not the end all be all, of course. Really, really hard to give awards to art and say, one thing is better than the other. But it is always cool to see awards bodies sort of broadening their horizons.
That's a really good point about the spread of genres that have done well at the box office this year, Chelsea. And also, yeah, great point about giving awards consideration to genre films increasingly, and that being a welcome trend. What do you think about that, Mitchell? Do you think that genre movies should be considered for Oscars more as often as they are and more often?
I definitely think so. I am biased as a huge fan of the horror um, film kind of genre, but there are a lot of really, really talented filmmakers of all different disciplines that get overlooked simply because of the fact that they're doing a horror film instead of something that is more prestigious. Uh, so you'll have folks like DPs, where last year I could think of a couple of horror filmmakers, including the DP on Longlegs, who is or Nosferatu, who I think both of them achieved something very, very interesting with their projects, and could have been highlighted for that. I think Nosferatu they were nominated in some kind of technical categories in a couple of different award shows, but you have actresses as well and actors like Toni Collette for Hereditary, Lupita Nyong'o for Us. Um, that their performances get overlooked, even though they are some of the greatest, most intense of the year. Um, Certainly, I do think that the Academy as a whole seems to be turning a little bit of a corner. They are awarding slightly more nominations to kind of non-traditional Oscar fare, where you take a look at films like The Substance last year or Everything Everywhere All at Once a couple of years ago, where those are both definitely genre and weird genre films at that, uh, that they did give some nominations to, but I think a lot of those are the exceptions more than they are the rule, which is a shame because there's so much great work going on a number of different levels for a lot of these films. Um, and when you have, I think, in any sort of awards body, um, a narrowing of what it means to be an awards film, it devalues that a little bit and it almost kind of risks making a parody of what an Oscar film can be. And we were talking a little bit last week about the Smashing Machine and stuff, but that is the sort of movie that you would be saying is like the prototypical awards movie that you could ever do. Meanwhile, something like a Everything Everywhere All at Once is absolutely not that. Um, and I would just love to see more variety, not bashing the Smashing Machine or anything, having not seen it, but I would love to see more variety so that we aren't just looking at, hey, like what appears to be like the big film with an actor in showy makeup that's doing a biopic or based on a true story. I would love to hear more films that are different, unique, creative, original concepts across all genres that, are able to enter those awards conversations.
I think as we talk about the studios catering more to domestic audiences, whereas international audiences are generally receding, in particular from more American style content, this is an opening for them to really lean into the interesting, the everything everywhere all at once is, and the long legs is, and really give American audiences what tickles their brains and gets them excited and gets the imagination wheels turning. So that's cool to think about. Because we are blessed with so many great questions, and I want to try to crack into as many of them as possible. Perhaps, Mitchell, we should switch gears and just try to briefly cover the second topic. Maybe we can do a speed round on the second topic and then get into to comments. What do you think?
That sounds great. Our second topic of the day is kind of vertical microdramas, which for those of you who may not know, are kind of very short, truncated pieces of drama, comedies, etc., mostly made for TikTok and other kind of like social media platforms. The idea is that they can be consumed very easily. They hook people in with engaging very high concept premises, and they are something that are growing in the industry. And that's a very, very brief categorization. But Chris, if you're available, and if I'm right that you had brought this up a couple weeks ago, yeah, do you have any insights on kind of vertical dramas or different things that might be interesting to speak of?
Yeah, I first heard of vertical dramas because during the pandemic, um, my friends in LA who kept working were Chinese friends working for Chinese vertical drama companies that they shot through the pandemic and beyond, and they had consistent work. And it's taken a while for Hollywood to kind of catch up with the Chinese. Vertical dramas were born in China and started as kind of the TV for the TikTok generation. And they caught on. I mean, they've been wildly popular in China for a while, but then they've caught on in other parts of the world. I think in large part due to the pandemic. I mean, due to, yes, different viewing habits, but also just world events and having less bandwidth maybe for longer viewing content. And a lot of these are kind of over the top, predictable. A lot of them are rom-coms. And so they were kind of easy, satisfying viewing. So the big company in California, I think they're in LA, is called Real Short, which is a Chinese company. But recently, there have been a few kind of American companies starting up. There's one called Microco short form content platform, so Microco, that has been launched just recently, just over the summer. And there's a UK company called Love something. I can't remember the name of it. And then most recently, Greg surfaced this, an actor who got Hollywood investment for his indie vertical drama, is how he's talking about it. So a vertical drama that he made that's 60 minutes long in total, although the episodes are anywhere from 1 minute to 10 minutes tops. In his case, I think they're all like 1 to 2 minute episodes. And he got Hollywood investment for this independent project that is made outside of these companies. He's an actor who got consistent work with Real Short, the Chinese company in LA, over the past few years. And then he's branched out and made his own drama. So it's kind of interesting to see. I mean, I've read articles that say this is the next boom. It's going to be a $14 billion business in no time. And I also saw a factoid that this Chinese company, Real Short, based in the US, it actually became the most popular product in Apple's App Store last year, overtaking TikTok even. And that it's been downloaded more than 30 million times since it was launched in 2022. So that's pretty impressive. And the possibilities of making independent content in this short form way are pretty interesting. I mean, at the moment, they're all kind of soapy, over the top dramas, and it'll be interesting if there's more that you can do that doesn't have the kind of exaggerated bad
Yeah.
dialogue.
Someone's
There
going to
have
make a
been
good
some,
version.
yeah, well, and in China, I've been very interested in this format, and I've seen like really impressive fantasy dramas with elaborate stunts and fight sequences, and so I think in the States it's been mostly kind of soap opera kind of content, but it'll be interesting to see what other genres kind of emerge from this and where indie filmmakers can take this.
This seems like a good way to utilize short filmmaking. We have a question in the comments about shorts, and it's a question we get often because it's a great place to start. You don't have to necessarily raise $1 million or $500,000 to make a short. You can just get into it and be filmmaking and make something that is great and that you can share and that could potentially start your career. And I've known a lot of folks over the years who have started very successful careers with a gorgeous, affecting, festival winning short film. But they don't monetize at all. There's no way to sell them. And there never has been. People have tried, companies as large as Vimeo have tried to rent shorts on their platform, and it just never works. And a lot of investment goes into providing infrastructure that people don't use. And I think, I mean, this is a very interesting parallel to that for a couple differences. I mean, one, it's vertical. So it's content designed for your iPhone, but that isn't in and of itself enough, right? Because we're hearing a lot of discussion now, comparisons to Quibi, the failed Jeffrey Katzenberg venture, where they put a lot of money into this idea that people were going to watch stuff on your phones. Maybe you could say they were too early. TikTok hadn't really taken off yet, but they were also doing one-offs, sketches, and I'm sure they had some series as well. But this, it's sad to think that maybe if we're going to watch a series on our phone, it has to be like 30-second long episodes or whatever it is. But that seems to be this
irony is that a lot of people end up spending an hour on their phone. So they're short episodes, but all I see are comment, and I myself have done this, where you end up watching 30 minutes to an hour.
It's that infinite scroll trained brain where we want those little micro breadcrumbs, and then we can sort of stay on the hook forever. I want to, people are talking about how much the boom, and you mentioned 14 billion, and the Ankler estimated that the market is currently 7 billion. Actually, the Ankler, interesting, kind of verifies what you said. It's estimated to be anywhere between 7 and 15 billion currently. Of course, they don't totally know because of the platforms on which this stuff is consumed, but there are some analytics companies tracking the monetization that say that in Q1 of 2025, over $700 million was made off these shorts. And you may be wondering or microdramas, I should call them. You may be wondering how that happens. And apparently it is a sort of a token system where users on these native microdrama platforms, users purchase coins or credits, and then they pay for that content. So you could ask questions about the reliability of the reporting that these apps are doing about their own advertising revenue and their own token revenue. Maybe there's a bit of a gray area there where we can't really verify the accuracy of the data. But when you tell me that the app is downloaded more than TikTok, that feels like something you can't easily fake. Or maybe you can, I don't know, but it's unlikely to be fake.
On the App Store, yeah, no, that feels like it would be accurate reporting. I mean, it says 30 million. This is from The Guardian, 30 million downloads.
So. I love it. I love that you also, we don't tout this often enough, but you kind of have a background in journalism, Chris, and docuseries, very fancy docuseries. So it's always cool to hear you bring information to us.
Yeah, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, anything else that you want to add to that topic, Chris? I mean, Slated does not facilitate the distribution or financing of microdramas currently. We're focused on feature films, but I think it's a very interesting area from which feature films can learn. And so, that's the context around which we're discussing this. I think there's similar to AI, we're not really advocating filmmakers go out and make a whole AI feature film right now for a number of reasons. But I think that what's happening with AI-driven content is certainly beneficial to narrative live production filmmakers. And so for those reasons, I think these were good topics to cover in this room. But is there anything else that you want to add to this topic, Chris or Chelsea or Mitchell? And then perhaps we can switch into questions if you guys all feel like it's the right time.
No, I don't have anything to add, just that I follow this topic with interest just because there's so many people who are working thanks to this boom, and that's really positive. And I feel like it's it could be such a great way to get experience with kind of low stakes story wise at the moment. From what I've heard and what I've seen, the shooting is very quick, and they just kind of rush through production. And so the friends that I have that have worked as directors and ADs and cinematographers, they quite enjoy it. They're not spending all this time thinking about story in the ways that they love, but the machinery and having to do the turnaround so quickly is a great training ground. And I find that really, really cool and really interesting. And even though a lot of it is kind of bad dialogue and bad acting just because of the turnaround times, I imagine, because of the dialogue, it's also quite addictive. And I'm looking forward to see as the quality gets better where that will take us.
Have you seen one that you would say is good yet?
Not enough to recommend. I mean, what I find interesting also is we were talking about rom-coms and materialists last week, and this idea that rom-coms are also not kind of awards worthy, and yet they generate so many people in the world are viewing these elaborate like romantic dramas and kind of soap opera content, and yet we see it as lowbrow, or like a movie like that isn't gonna appeal to people around the world or not be awards worthy. I just find that really interesting, the contradiction of how we think of this kind of content and then how popular it actually is.
I blame sexism. I think anything that that is associated with female-driven audiences sometimes are easily discounted. But the same excuse can't be made for horror films. So maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I don't know, but I mean the number of viewers. I mean, it's not just women watching this content around the world.
Yeah, I'll never admit to it.
So I don't know. But so the one that I watched recently was The Double Life of My Billionaire Husband. And I got pretty far into it. I didn't finish it, but I was surprised at myself for looking up from the screen, and it was 45 minutes into it.
Well, I'm glad that this can be a safe space where we can admit these kinds of things to one another. I applaud you, and I'm sure, here's the thing. It can be cheesy, but audiences will forgive a lot, won't they? If the tension mechanics really work. I mean, this is a sort of I'm kind of pitching you a line drive down the center, Chris, as the person who oversees all of our coverage, but tension mechanics probably really matter for this medium in a way that they may not matter as much in a feature script, right? It's like, do you have any thoughts on that just before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, and the ones I've seen do it quite well. It's just it's a different format, so I think you do have to have kind of the TikTok mind because it's quite condensed. So it's it's very plotty, and there are a lot of turning points that are condensed, but they're the ones that do create a bit of suspense to see what will happen. That's what keeps you watching. So there isn't much character development. but
Wow. See, that's so interesting. Okay, well, when you develop the microdrama rubric for us, you can advise that the character section receive a lower weight and the pacing section and tension section receive a higher weight. And we'll have to base that on data, but I think you're making a good case for it.
yeah, and the trafficking in tropes is really interesting. You have to just kind of accept that and be okay with it because it's kind of the foundation. And then so there's a predictability, but then a lot of twists. So that's what keeps you watching is to see how will this escalate even more. So yeah, it would be an interesting case study to write a rubric for this.
Well, I am intrigued. Mitchell, can we come back to you and see what's happening in the comments? And perhaps we may have a raised hand or two. But feel free if you have more to add to the microdrama topic or anything we've covered so far, feel free to add to that, and then we can switch over.
No, yeah, I've just been listening and very, very interested in everything here. It's a topic I'm super unfamiliar with, so it's been really cool hearing you guys talk about it. But yeah, I'll go over to the comments section now. But this is a reminder that as we get into these questions, if you do have a question that you want to ask out loud, you can go ahead and click on the react button at the bottom of the screen and click on the raise your hand emoji, and that will signal to us that you're ready, and we'll bring you up and you can take yourself off mute and have, ask whatever is on your mind. Until then, since I'm not seeing any hands currently raised, though I think there were some a little bit earlier, I'll go over to the comments. So the first question that I can see, and I have to scroll up because there's a lot of them today, which is excellent. This one comes from Ian, who asks, "Hi, everyone. Can you tell me on Slated independent films who owns the copyright and IP to the movie?" Many thanks. And that's a very good question. I'll probably turn it over a little bit to maybe Greg over on this topic, but for the most part, when filmmakers come on board the platform, they're owning the rights themselves. They can strike deals with other financiers and different folks like that that can dilute the rights, but for the most part on Slated, people aren't optioning their projects. They're actively trying to produce them themselves, get them made, create a package around which that they can ultimately get their films into production and beyond. So a lot of that will mean the filmmakers are retaining rights or at least partial rights and ownership of the property kind of throughout the process. But Greg or Chelsea or Chris, can you guys think of any like specific examples or anything like that where filmmakers, making an independent film would be enticed to do it? Do you see in your experience financiers really wanting to take on, the full ownership of the rights?
I'll just add that this is the difference between independent film and studio movies, Ian. So if you're coming to Slated, you are here to make your film independently. And so that means that you are a producer on the movie and you are in control and you don't have to sell your rights. The reason that writers sell their rights to studios is because if a studio is going to make your film, and I think it was 2 weeks ago we talked about all of the spec screenplay sales that have occurred so far this year. That's a very different relationship. It's a relationship where the studio comes in, it buys the screenplay, and the writer is off. Basically, effectively, they're off. Often they're hired to do a rewrite or a new draft and a polish. But for the most part, writers who sell their scripts are not really involved in the making of those movies. So if you're not selling your script to a studio, which is 1 million out of 1,100,000 scripts that are written every year, then you're probably making it independently. But that comes with a lot of benefits and advantages as you remain in control. The writer is often a producer on their own film. They are having a say over the director that gets attached, the cast that gets attached, and they're doing some of the work and learning with their sleeves rolled up. So, we have several cases of first-time produced writers that came to us with the first script they ever wrote and ended up producing the movie along with the producers, directors, cast, and investors that Slated introduced to them. And that can be a really thrilling experience. And it's what independent film is all about. So if you're making a movie independently, you retain the rights. Slated doesn't interfere or interject in that process at all. The only gray area in between, I would say, is if you're talking to a producer with an overall deal at a studio. So this, Jason Blum has an overall deal at Universal. So like if someone like Jason Blum wants to option your scripts while they try to package it for Universal, I don't know that he does deals that way, but in that case, an option may be worth considering. But short of a producer with an overall deal to studio who you can identify in the trades, short of that, it no longer makes sense to option screenplays to producers anymore. That's a thing of the past. And if any producer wants to do a deal with you like that, I am not a lawyer and this is not legal advice, but if I were in those shoes, I would do an attachment agreement instead, where they don't own the rights, but they have the right to talk about the project. And they would be attached and paid should they deliver some results to you. That makes more sense than taking the rights away, I think, as a former manager. And again, that's not legal advice, but I think hopefully that covers it as comprehensively as you were hoping for.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. Yeah, that was, I'll speak for myself. That was very comprehensive. And Ian, if you're still in the room and you have any other questions, please let us know and we'll be happy to clarify. So our next question comes from Simon, who said that we just received development funds for our project with director and cinematographer attached. Would love to hear your thoughts on next steps, as this is my first time as screenwriter and producer. Casting, budget breakdown, I presume, would be in the mix. And that's a great question. Yeah, if you have development fundings, I think that there's a number of things that you can probably put those towards that are better than others. For my perspective, I would say that the most essential things to get on your project, now that you've already have your director on, assuming that you're the writer and that you're a good place with the script, would be to put those towards getting a casting director, getting a full line item budget, and potentially a pitch deck if you don't already have one yourself. A couple different reasons for each one of those. For materials, having a pitch deck and a full line item budget are going to be some of the most helpful materials that you'll need on the project, because they are the first things that investors and a lot of prospective attachments will want to actually see when they come on board. A pitch deck is going to be the thing that you hopefully are leading off with before a lot of people even see the screenplay. So having a great one that you're proud of can do real wonders for that. Similarly, a full line item budget is going to be something that is integral for investors. And it's also something that's great for you as a filmmaker, because it makes sure that when you're starting the casting process, you'll have a very firm idea of in what general range the budget is going to be, even though some variables are going to go up and down. But you're going to be able to cast commensurate with the budget that you're after. And then a casting director is probably, that other big piece of the puzzle. And for us, we are definitely under the belief that casting directors are worth their weight in gold, specifically ones that are in the independent film space, because those folks can get projects out to actors who filmmakers may not be able to contact on their own. And that becomes especially important as you're trying to reach for, your one or two significant recognizable names on the project that are going to be needed to get the project, in front of financiers and have them demonstrate some interest. That is all, of course, going to change a little bit depending on the size and scope of your project, but having a casting director almost never hurts in any circumstance, especially if they are willing to take on the film and go out to people without the full financing being in place, which is, again, something that is generally expected in the independent film space, and an independent casting director will really get to that. If you do need any assistance with any of those deliverables, or you're seeking kind of advice on any of those as well, one of the things that we do is our EP consulting service, where we do have a tier that provides exactly that, line item budget and a pitch deck for filmmakers in need. And we also come on board projects and advise on developing things like casting, getting a director, getting a producer, screenplay notes, creative. And we really try to tailor it for each individual project. I'll probably post a little bit more of that on the chat, but before I go into just making this a full-on advertisement, I do want to turn it over to Greg, Chelsea, Chris. If there's anything else that if a filmmaker has some development funds in their pocket, is there anything else other than those three things that you might advise, or is there kind of a priority that you would recommend Simon take?
I feel like you covered it pretty comprehensively. I'll add that, investors really only start engaging on projects that have cast. And I've spoken with Simon before, I think, and from what I remember from our past conversations about this project, if it is indeed the same project, you have a talented DP on board, you have an experienced director, which I think puts you in a really great position to start having those casting conversations. So, like Mitchell said, I think becomes really important. And of course, before you start having those conversations, kind of going in, you sort of know what they will want to know, which is who might they be acting opposite, who the director will be, what they'll be paid, where you'll be shooting. And so again, like Mitchell said, you'll want to have a budget together, perhaps a loose production plan in place, finance plan in place, and materials that you might be able to show them from your director to sort of convince them that this is the right project for them to join. But otherwise, I think, yeah, Mitchell's advice sounded perfect to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chelsea. I guess we are a couple minutes away from 2 o'clock, so I'll put this in as a last call to get your questions in. I know there's a number that are still in the chat, so we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. But if there's anything percolating in the back of your mind and you're ready to go ahead and ask that question, now is the time to do so. So the next question comes to us from Dr. Jerry Brown, who says, I have 166 investors on Slated, but it seems like they are locked. My message doesn't work. I don't know how to reconnect. That's a very good question. I would say that probably for this particular project, if you can send a message over to our customer support desk, we'll take a look at it and see what's happening on the project. In general, without taking a look at this project in particular, I'll say that the number one thing that we would want to look for is that the project is activated on the marketplace and that the investors haven't already been reached out to. If, for context on Slated, when you reach out to somebody, those messaging threads stay locked until the other person accepts the thing. So if there's 166 investors who have already been messaged, those conversations are going to be locked until the other parties, opt to accept the message and the thread opens up correspondingly. And in this case, like I said, probably will involve a little bit of a deeper dive into it. So feel free to message us there and we'd be glad to take a look. All right. The next question comes from Dr. Candy O'Bell, who says, we are interested in working with producers, directors that can assist us in getting our screenplay into production. We've had positive results from Beacon Paramount based upon my bestseller. Any responses? And congratulations on the bestseller. Yeah, I would say that Slated is a very interesting place that might be able to help with that. If you haven't already, my best advice would be to go ahead, list your film on the marketplace, activate it, and go ahead and create an opportunity seeking both of those roles, a producer and a director. From there, you're going to be able to start receiving matches for the project who correspond to your interests, and you can start messaging any of those people that are matched with it. If you're interested in it as well, you can also submit your project for script analysis. If the script scores highly, you may see a wider range of matches and kind of a wider pool of talent that you can connect to as the script scores highly. But those would be my kind of primary things as well. If you are interested in consulting, that is another option that we see filmmakers, in earlier stages of development go to as well, as that is something that we try to help with achieving and getting a director, a producer on projects, something we've done several times before. And, we're always happy to provide as much of that insight as we can.
It's getting a movie made is easier than it's ever been, but it's still like climbing Mount Everest. I mean, really it is. I think it's not the same as, doing a little weekend project. That's a short film, maybe if you're rushing it, but I think you should plan better for short film too. But for a feature film, you really do have to plan the ascent very carefully. You have to have a great crew that you really trust, and you have to really kind of research it and know what you're doing if you want to be successful. And the consulting services that Mitchell has developed are the best of its kind, in my personal, obviously biased opinion, but I think they really are the best version of it out there. So if you want somebody who has seen the full cycle on a feature film 70 times in a row and also helped so many movies from the earlier stage, I think Mitchell is an amazing partner to bring on, and it's sort of pay as you go month to month. So you can bring Mitchell onto your team to consult with you for 1 month or for 3 months or indefinitely. And you can even pause and come back. So we've had a lot of filmmakers that have brought Mitchell on until they got the script in bulletproof, amazing shape. And then Mitchell facilitated that outreach to casting directors and directors, or got their pitch deck ready and then facilitated the outreach of the full package of materials. And then those films entered the casting process where, with Mitchell's advice, they're sort of making offers to actors, waiting for reads. Sometimes in that doldrums period where you're waiting for reads and you kind of know what you're doing, you know what the game plan is, Mitchell's already helped you make a list of all the actors that you want per role and what order to go to them in and how to prioritize. You may feel like, oh, okay, this is a good time to pause, save a little bit of money, and come back to Mitchell once we have our first role locked or our first two roles locked. And then you can activate Mitchell again for that next phase. So it's you can use it, you can turn the tap on and off as you want. And making a film, that ascent is you shouldn't go alone. It can be lonely and very tiring. And the most important thing with getting a movie made, I say this to anyone who will listen, is that every week you wake up and you take a step forward and you ask yourself, and this is something that Jay, our head of film finance, is amazing at, better than anyone else I've met, is sometimes it can feel like you're hitting a wall with these movies. But you, even on those weeks, you got to wake up, you got to ask yourself, what can we do to move this project forward? Where are we getting friction? How can we be strategic about advancing? And EP consulting is really that service designed to help you figure that out from week to week, and continue making progress. Because movies that continue making progress week after week after week after week, whether sometimes it's one step forward, sometimes it's two steps back, but as long as you're going through that process and the trend is towards advancing the film, then you're on track to get it made. It may take a few years. Films that don't do that, that flame out, those movies are never going to be made. And we've seen enough projects, some of them great scripts, that don't get to the finish line simply because they stop or because they didn't have the right advice going in and they made a few errors that you unfortunately can't undo. And so Mitchell's going to help you make sure that you don't make any of those errors, I should say, from which you can't return. And he's also going to make sure that you're making that incremental progress week after week. And also, he's just a great person to check in with and talk to, so that it's not such a lonely process. In addition to getting you the best pitch deck and budget and casting advice and everything else. So as long as we're offering this service, I'm going to be really telling everyone how great it is, because I just am in awe of the work that you do, Mitchell. So I know I make you blush, but I can't stop the plugs.
Well, thank you, Craig. I really appreciate that. Yeah, if for anybody that is interested, I just put a link in the comments section where you can check out a little bit more and contact us if you have any questions, or you'd like to find out a little bit more. All right. So continuing on, I know we're a little bit past the hour, so we'll try to go rapid fire across the next few ones of these. Bill says, brand new screenwriter, producer, taking my screenplay to Austin. When dealing with a distributor, do they pay for the promo materials like posters up front and take all those expenses in the percentage, or do I supply all the copies up front? Great question. This is something that we had Chandler, who handles a lot of the films that we help to distribute on. That would be great. But for our insight, or at least from what I've seen over on the sidelines and from the deals that other filmmakers have done, a lot of films will essentially come on with a distributor. They have their own percentage that they get to take from what the film actually makes. But they also have fees built into that. Basically, like they are going to recoup whatever they spend on advertising first before the film actually goes into those profits. So it won't just be a percentage that they take that will cover those expenses. Usually it's, an actual charge of whatever they have themselves purchased for the film in way of promotion, theater bookings, etc., that they recoup first before the film is able to start generating revenue. But I'll open it up to Chelsea, Greg, if you guys have heard anything different, or if there's anything else you want to add to that specific topic.
I don't think so. I think you covered it. It's that, I think in the most of the cases that we are seeing, an independent filmmaker will often have a lot of these materials, right? Like you're always creating your own because they're so important for you to have in general, even at like the investor stage, right? Like your art and trailers and whatnot. So if you have those materials already, I do think that you might be able to keep a marketing fee or cost at a distributor a little bit lower. A distributor might say, I think we can, cut a better trailer, or put some money towards making a better poster. And those are conversations that you can have with them before you sort of enter into a contract with them. They might think that your materials are totally fine and are happy to move forward with just them as they are. But in any case, yeah, they'll have a fee that they will recoup, before the film's revenue, as Mitchell said. So yeah, it really just depends on sort of what size distributor you are going with and sort of what materials you already have in place and what quality they feel they might be able to make, and what types of business they might do with the materials that they have, or whether or not they feel like they want to invest to elevate those materials.
There
Thank you,
you
Chelsea.
have it. Yeah. Very well said, guys. And I would just say, for the filmmakers out there, it's everything that Mitchell and Chelsea just said. It's really up to you. You'll be able to decide that if and when a filmmaker expresses interest. And do you want that help? Do you not want that help? Are you willing to pay for it? Most distributors will make it your choice unless they have just a really incredible marketing infrastructure, and in which case you probably do want them to spend as long as it's reasonable. And this team up here can tell you, if you get into that spot, whether you're engaging Slated or not, I'm sure this team up here would be happy to weigh in, even if it's by chat, on like, oh, my distributor asked for this amount in recoupables. Is this reasonable? And they'll look at the size of the film and they'll just tell you in their own experience if they think that that's a reasonable ask and if it's worth it for that distribution company to do business with them. So I mean, that's one of the great things that this resource as a community offers is the team up here helps the community of filmmakers get movies made, and then the community of filmmakers can rely on this team's collective knowledge from seeing all these different deals, and it's this sort of virtuous cycle of feedback and support. Hopefully that's the idea of it. And I think that Mitchell and Chelsea's answers just exemplified that perfectly. Mitchell, it's 2:08. Do we have other questions still?
I think we only have one more question, so I'll run through it a little bit. But Christopher asks, hello to the Slated crew. I'm developing a stop frame animated short. Subject matter is a little niche, World War One air war. So I'm wondering if script writing contests can be effective pathways to financing and/or literary agency attention. Any thoughts would be greatly appreciated. I would say that yes, for specifically a short, if you are wanting to submit that to film festivals and different things like that, those can be helpful to gaining some traction and attention. In general, script writing competitions, I find, and I'm generalizing this a little bit more for the questions of financing, and in the feature film space. But in general, I think screenwriting competitions are a little bit tricky. You can gain some notoriety based on them. You can get more eyes on your project, which is great. But I think there's only a few of them, like the very, very big ones that do so in a in a way that could make all the difference for your project. It's always, of course, great to have eyes on your project, to be getting feedback from screenplay analysts. And if you have accolades on your project, it can always sound impressive when you're able to list them off. But in terms of like ones, if you like win, X competition, there's only a few that I think are like big things like that that will make tangible differences. And even in those cases, they aren't necessarily going to guarantee automatic financing in production of your film and or representation. Greg, I think you've spoken a little bit on some of these festivals. I know that there's a couple of them that we talked about in the past that are kind of our favorites in terms of the most impactful. But any kind of insights into the competition space that you can share?
Well, on shorts in particular, so we have been able to work with so many talented story analysts in the years that we've been offering script analysis. You can imagine, not thousands, but hundreds of really talented people that have gone on to do incredible things, direct box office record-setting movies, become distribution executives, become big agents. And one of them went on to work for a company that offered a competition, and I believe they also offered coverage. I'm not entirely sure. Called Shore Scripts, I believe, SHORE, and they have what they advertise as a short film fund. Now, I've never submitted to it, but I've seen the marketing around it, and it seems cool. I think that they give a production grant to the winning short film. I don't know how many times they hold this competition every year. Maybe it's an annual thing, or maybe more often than that. I'm sure you can find all the details at their website, but that's the only festival I've heard of that for an unproduced short screenplay, the award is actually a meaningful amount of production funds. And I don't know what that is. It's like maybe it's 10,000 or 15,000 or something like that. But for a short film, that's really helpful. So yeah, that's the only one I've heard of. And other than that, I don't think I can say it better than Mitchell said it. Feedback's always good. Beyond that, I don't think an award on a short screenplay is going to launch any careers. But if you produce a short, and that gets awards at some notable film festivals, then that certainly can do a lot for your career as a director, less so as a writer, but definitely as a director and a producer. As a writer, it's still helpful. It's just not going to, probably get you signed by an agency.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Greg. Cool. I think since we are past 2 o'clock, we're actually at 2:12 right now. I think we'll go ahead and wind down the room. So if there are any questions that we didn't get to today, you can feel free to come by next week. We have these meetings every week on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific time. So if you can go ahead and ask your question again there, if you already posted in the chat, not, it's still percolating, feel free to just write it or raise your hand on next week's session. Additionally, for any more pressing questions, you can go ahead and go to slated.com and pose those directly to our customer service, and we'll try our best to assist you then and there. I want to thank our panel today. So Greg, Chelsea, Chris, thank you all for great topics of conversation. And thank you all to everybody who attended today for a very lively room, some great questions. As mentioned, if you like what you see and you want to hear from us again, you can go ahead and tune into our next room, which will be, again, at Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. You can also go check out our YouTube channel, just at Slated. And there you'll be able to see some recordings and highlights of past events like these, as well as interviews with filmmakers and more. I think with that, I'll go ahead and wind it down. Thank you all again for coming to today's session. I'll be back next week. And until then, have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Mitchell. Thanks, everyone.